Nuts and bolts with Tone here, guys. Welcome to my channel. Today I have a 2014 Toyota Prius with a very common problem. The timing cover is leaking. Usually they start out where just the tensioner leaks and then they end up where the whole back of the timing cover leaks. It's super common. This is a 2014, it's a third gen Prius, and I'm going to show you how to do this. Now the interesting thing is that Toyota, repair information, all data, everything, the first step in doing a timing cover, cylinder head, it doesn't matter, is remove engine. So you get paid quite a bit of time to do the job, but you don't actually need to remove the engine. So I'm going to show you how to pull that timing cover off and reseal it and give you all the tips along the way. Let's get started. Now, if you have a lift and you're doing this in a shop, the fastest way to do this is take off this undercover, take off this side cover right here. Go ahead and drain your oil because the oil sits higher than the timing cover. While you have it here, you want to go ahead and take off your oil filter right there. Pull your oil filter cap out. And then go ahead and pop off the bolts right there. You have 4 12s, and that's the housing, and just let it drain. You're going to have your connectors back here, a crank sensor, an oil pressure switch, and an O2 sensor. Disconnect those, unclip it from the metal harness because you're going to pull the harness all the way up and over. Then drain your coolant right here. So take out 3 bolts and then loosen 1, and then just tap it with a hammer. It doesn't take much and it'll pop loose. And then we can go ahead and pull this housing off like that. Super easy. And then you have those 2 O-rings there. You want to make sure you get those so you don't lose them, to match them up. And depending on the miles on the vehicle, they're going to be pretty stuck in there. These ones came out not super bad. So these are the same these O-rings are the same size as 1 or 2 of them inside the timing cover. I believe it's the one that's 1. It's really bad. You can see it leaks all down the back of the timing cover. That's why we're replacing the timing cover. That's why we're resealing the timing cover. So I did this way out of order. To do this the fastest, the first thing you want to do is take off your wipers, take off your cowl, get all this out of the way. Take your valve cover off to get your engine rolled over to top dead center. Then while you have it in the air, you can take the balancer off, the water pump bolts out, and all the timing cover bolts out from underneath while it's in the air, and it's easier. So this one here, you can push it down like that. The plastic part that goes over the cowl is super easy. You just have a bunch of little clips along the front and it'll come right out. You're going to disconnect the connector and unclip the harness. Then you're going to have 4 10s for the wiper motor assembly. You're going to get those out, and then the wiper motor comes right out. Then there's going to be a bunch of 10s along the metal cowl panel. You're going to unbolt all those and pop it loose. Get a vacuum to vacuum up all the debris, and it'll pop up and come right out. So your airbox has bolts inside. They're all 10s. And then for your intake air tube on the throttle body is a clamp. Everything else is a 10 mil. So these are the new Lyle electrical disconnect pliers. These work great for fuel injector connectors. You just do like that. Look at how easy it releases them. Super simple and not very expensive at all. So I unbolt everything on the harness so I can pull it over like this, and I use a bungee to get it all the way out of the way. So I take the cam sensor out of the valve cover and the oil control valve out of the valve cover, so that way when I clean it, I don't have to worry about them. Your center valve cover bolt has a washer. A new washer will come with your Molly set. These valve covers aren't too hard to get off. Just take a pry bar, wiggle it on both sides, get it to pop right off. So the next thing we need to do is put a jack stand and a piece of wood under the oil pan, or if you don't have a lift, then you'll need to use a jack to support the engine, because we have to take the engine mount out. The engine mount, you're going to have a bolt and a nut right there, and then a nut underneath. That nut's going to be a 14, the top 2 are 17s, and then you're going to have 3 17 millimeter bolts around the perimeter. And if you go ahead and take your coolant bottle bolts out, you can get the engine mount out. Then we need to take this bracket off for the engine mount, but this stud right here is in the way for that bolt. So if you take that stud out, then you can take that bolt out easily. So once you get the valve cover off, now this is really important. We're gonna roll over the crank until the notch right there lines up with the 0. But what we're looking for is there's a dot on the back cam and a slot on the front cam. This slot right here is gonna be around the 1 o'clock position. This is gonna be around the 12 o'clock position. So if we roll this over to 0 and we don't see those 2 marks, that means that the crank is 360 degrees off, because this crank rotates 2 times per 1 time of the camshaft. So if we're lined up here and this is not there, that means that this dot is down there and this slot right here is down there. So we're gonna roll this thing over the first time and let's see where we come up, because we need this thing to be in time. So as you can see right here, we have the crank lined up, and let's take a look up top, and we don't have a notch right there, and we don't have a dot on the rear cam. That means that the cams are 180 off. So now we need to turn the crank 360. So now I turned it 1 more time. So I was on the wrong mark before, but it was still off. So now we've rotated the crank 360 degrees, and now we have our notch on the front cam right there. And we have our dot on the rear cam, meaning the engine is timed. So your water pump is electronic, so you have your connector disconnected. Take your 5 bolts out and pop your water pump off. Your thermostat housing is going to have to unbolt because it bolts to the back of the timing cover. Now the problem with the thermostat housing is you have this bypass coolant hose back here, and the engine oil dipstick tube is in the way. Well, I'm not replacing this thermostat housing. I just need to remove it from the timing cover. So what I'm going to do is disconnect the engine oil dipstick, and then I will be able to unbolt the thermostat housing and pull it back. The dipstick, there's a clip there, and there's a bolt right there that bolt the dipstick up. There's also a connector right here that connects in, so you have to unclip that connector. That stud is just an 8 mil. Zap that out, then you can get to that bolt, and you got the 3/14s, and you get that engine bracket out. That's what it looks like right there. It's got silicone on the threads because it goes through the timing cover. So the top fastener and the front fastener are a 10 millimeter nut, and on the back side is a 10 mil bolt. So with the dipstick out, you can get an extension and a wobble socket, and you can get down in there from behind, right along the block. Before you take the tensioner out, you want to get this balancer off. It's a 19 mil. And if you put a pry bar on the top corner and pull on the bottom corner, it will come out. So here's what your tensioner looks like this. It's got a metal gasket, and it's got a little lever right there. Now that lever faces up because it's to lock the tensioner in place for install. So we're going to have to reset this tensioner, and we're going to use that little clip there to hold it in the reset position. I'll show you that later. So I mark the chain to the sprockets. Right there, I mark it to the dot, and that front one, I mark both the links on both sides of the notch. Because this slipper that's on the rear, where the tensioner normally resides, it can slip off of the inside of the block and fall down. So if that slipper falls backwards, then your non-tension side of your chain can slip off the crank, and it can possibly move on the front, which would make your engine out of time. So I mark that link right there next to the dot on the crank, and I know that that's where the engine was when I started. And before I put it back together, I make sure all 3 sprockets align. Now there's an O-ring right there. That O-ring is the same as the 2 on the front of the timing cover for the oil filter housing. And then you have two smaller O-rings up here, right there. Now, those are all in your timing kit as long as you get a Molly kit. So that's the bigger one, that's the bottom one, and these are the top two, they're smaller. And this big one goes there, the two small ones go there. So we're going to go ahead and knock the crank seal out, clean up the thermostat seal where the thermostat's going to ride. And we're going to flip it over. You're going to clean up where those two O-rings go. You're going to clean up the front of the water pump surface where the water pump seals. Anytime I remove a timing chain tensioner, I replace it. Usually I will sell it with the job. On this one, I didn't estimate it out because this one came in for something completely different and I really didn't think they were going to fix it. Most people don't fix the timing cover on Priuses. Next up, we need to clean the block. We need to get all this silicone off of the block surface, the head surface, everywhere that the timing chain rides. We need to get that all cleaned up. And right there, you have one bolt hole right there. You're going to get that silicone off there as well. Now that's where that 10 mil rides. That 10 mil has a washer that's just like the one in the middle of the valve cover. It comes in your Molly set, as long as you get a Molly set, and it is right there. Don't forget it. And you want to get all this old silicone off of all your timing cover bolts. You don't want that to go through and compromise your silicone seal. So I always take it over to a wire wheel and I run it around there and I get all the silicone off all the threads and clean up the bolt heads as well. All right, you want to get your timing cover all clean, knock your old crank seal out, get all this clean, put your new crank seal in. Before you take your old one out, you want to kind of look at the depth of your crank seal so you kind of get an idea of about where it needs to be. Clean up your water pump surface. I always take out, if you use a parts washer or anything with heat, I always take out the oil pressure switch. I don't like putting sensors in parts washers. Clean up your tensioner surface. You want to clean up your thermostat surface here and get all this cleaned up nice and clean and dry. And also the top. Now we got to go clean the engine, and then we'll give this a final wipe down before we put silicone. So here's what I'm using for parts. So I got the Molly valve cover set. This comes with everything you need for the valve covers. And then what you want to do is this Molly set right here, the Molly timing cover set, it comes with almost everything that you need. The only thing it's not going to come with is a thermostat seal, this variable valve timing gasket, and then there's a little tiny gasket that goes in the top of the valve cover. You got the one that rides there and one that rides there. So you won't have either one of these and you won't have a thermostat seal. And your Molly kit comes with silicone and everything. So here's what the timing cover should look like with your silicone. You're gonna have thicker silicone right there because there's it's where the head and the block meet. And you're gonna have a thicker amount of oil of silicone there, and also right there. You're gonna go around just like that. And also where this one bolt right here goes. Don't put silicone right there, and don't put silicone there. We have oil seals for that. So if you really want to torque it in the order of procedure, go ahead and pause it here and draw yourself a picture. That's all the numbers in order. Now here is all the torque specs. So I'm going to show you what each letter indicates as far as the torque. But that's what it is. So you can pause it right there. You can get your torque spec and your torque procedure. So if you look at the torque spec right here, A, E, and F are 19 foot-pounds. That's going to be your 12 mil bolts. B and C, that's your 38 foot-pound bolts. It's going to be your 14 mil. And bolt D is 7 foot-pounds. That's your little 10 mil bolt. And that 7 foot-pounds calculates out to 84 inch-pounds. Just so I don't forget to put it in the video, the valve cover right there is 7 foot-pounds, which is 84 inch-pounds. Now it's time to clean the head and the block surface. And so what I do to get all the old silicone off is I have a little scraper from Matco Tools, just a few bucks. I think it's under $5. Turn that screw, take out your old razor blade, put a new one in. Gives you a nice little flat surface. I use a wire brush to get the rest of the silicone off, and then I take little sheets of Scotch-Brite pad and I cut them into squares. So I take that little square of Scotch-Brite pad and I spray it with brake clean, and then I scrub. And then I spray it with brake clean and I scrub. And as long as you keep the Scotch-Brite pad covered in brake clean, it will continue to scrub really good. If you let it dry out, then it will start to not clean. So you want to make sure that you get all the silicone off of all the areas. I actually will go with a mirror and just double check to make sure everything is clean. And then we need to put O-rings in those 3 spots right there. So what I do is I have some Sil Glide, I put the O-rings in, and then I put some Sil Glide over them to help hold the O-rings in place. And it will look like that right there, and like that. Now you just want to make sure you don't get silicone on those spots. Only Sil Glide. So once you get your timing cover all clean, you want to spray it all off with brake clean all around the whole area here. And then I usually will take a rag with brake clean and wipe it around one more time. And then once you do that, you want to go back with a rag and give it a nice little dry. Now don't forget to go around that coolant passage right there that feeds the thermostat and the water pump. You also want to make sure that you clean off your spot for your O-rings, and also don't forget to put silicone right there. And then clean off for that O-ring as well. Now the last thing that I do before I put silicone on this is I take all the bolts over to the to the wire wheel, and I wire wheel all the old silicone off of the threads, and I clean up the heads of the bolts so that way they're clean, because some of them are going to be covered in oil, and I don't want it to look like, I want you to know that I was in there and I did that job and everything is clean. Now if you're not going to replace your tensioner, then you need to reset it. Now to reset it, you have to have this lever turned this way because it's going to lock onto that pin. You have to push down on that mechanism right there. You can push down with your finger like that, or you can stick a screwdriver between the teeth on the plunger and the mechanism. What you have to do is you have to pry out on that while you turn a vise, pushing the plunger inside the tensioner. Once you get it all the way inside, then you can flip that lever and lock it onto the pin. Now, if you don't have this lever fully open, the mechanism, then it'll bite on those teeth as you start to go inside. So that's what it looks like right there. Now, once we're all done and we put this in the vehicle, we have to pop that pin off. Otherwise, that tensioner will stay locked in place. I'll show you how to do that. You want to make sure you get your old metal gasket off of your tensioner. If you get the Molly kit, it comes with a new tensioner gasket. You don't want to reuse the gasket because one of the more common problems with this engine is the timing chain tensioner leaks. The gasket leaks and it makes quite a mess. So you definitely don't want to reuse the gasket. So even though in the picture of the timing cover they show you to put extra silicone in certain places, I still put the silicone around the timing cover, and then at all the seams, there's 2 seams on each side where the upper oil pan and the lower the block meet, and then also where the head and the block meet, I put a little dab of silicone on each one of those seams. So remember, we marked the chain and all the sprockets, so now it's time to go and make sure that everything is still timed up good. The crank is still timed. And now we're going to double check the cams to make sure they haven't moved. All right, that one looks good, and that one looks good. So here's a great tool to get. It's from Valco Cincinnati. So if you get silicone that's in a tube like this Molly silicone is in a tube, and it gets quite tiring to be pushing on this tube while you're going around a whole timing cover. So you slide the tube in these basically it's like a little handle, and it has a spring, and then you squeeze the handle, and then it applies pressure on the tube of silicone. Now here we are running the silicone all around the timing cover. This is what it looks like. Don't forget that spot right there. And then now you can see right here where I put it along the seams of the engine. And I forgot one. There's 3 seams on each side. Don't forget that. So once you get your timing cover in place, go ahead and put all your bolts in. And remember, your 12 mils are going to be 19 foot-pounds, your 14 mils are going to be 38 foot-pounds, and your 10 mils is going to be 84 inch-pounds. So you want to go and you want to put a couple in the top and a couple in the bottom to make sure your timing cover is on properly, and then go ahead and put it in. Now, once I torque the bolts, I like to put a dot on there, so I go around with a mirror to make sure that I didn't miss any bolts, because it's easy to miss one. Once you've got your timing cover all torqued and you double checked all the bolts, you're going to put your water pump in. Put a new gasket in your water pump, put that in because a couple of the bolts bolt through the timing cover. So you're going to put those 5 bolts in and torque them at 19 foot-pounds. Then you're going to put your engine bracket on and torque those to 38 foot-pounds. Next is the timing chain tensioner. When you put the timing chain tensioner in, you want to take your tensioner and you're going to have 2 nuts, and that's a little clip that goes on the bottom nut for your wiring harness bracket. It's a bracket for your wiring harness. You're going to take your timing chain tensioner and clean it up. You're going to put a new gasket, and you're going to have to apply inward pressure because it's going to be pushing on the slipper while you run the nuts in. It's going to be trying to push out on you. So the torque spec for the timing chain tensioner is 9 foot-pounds. I think it's 108 inch-pounds or 106 inch-pounds. I can't remember. I'm not going to go over there and look. But anyways, what you guys need to do a job like this, you need a good headlamp. This is a Streamlight headlamp. It tilts this way. The back of this thing turns to the side, so if you're on your creeper, the battery pack's not up against the back of your head. But anyways, all right. Moving on. Now, I can't show you this part, but I'll explain it. So right down there, it's really hard to see, is the timing chain tensioner. You have to stick a screwdriver down there. This is very important. Do not put this valve cover on. I've done it before. I got pulled away when I was doing a timing cover, and I got pulled away, and when I came back, I smashed the valve cover, and then I realized I didn't pull the chain thing. You have to release that chain tensioner or you're gonna destroy the engine. So anyways, make sure that you release that lever all the way, and you'll hear it clunk out. Now, when you're putting your timing chain tensioner in, you're gonna have to apply pressure because it's pushing up against that non-tension side of the timing chain. So I'm gonna flip this lever. The valve cover is 84 inch-pounds as well. So you can actually take this chain guide here, the slipper, and push it towards the back, and it'll push in on the tensioner, and then that will pop the lever out. And once you get the lever popped out, you need to just move it out of the way more so it doesn't get stuck on anything. So the last thing is, once you've released your tensioner and all that's good, you want to take a razor blade and cut your old silicone off flush with the top right there. Then you're going to wipe it down with brake clean, and you're going to apply a little bead of silicone on each one of those seams, and you're going to put your valve cover on. Do not forget your oil control solenoid gasket there and the O-ring. So if you went the route of pulling the dipstick to not have to take these tubes off of the hoses off of the thermostat housing, then don't forget to put your dipstick tube back in. Now, one thing to add is that if you are replacing your thermostat, then you don't really need to take this dipstick out. You can just take, because you have to take the hoses off anyways. This case, I didn't replace the thermostat, and so we needed to move the dipstick. And tell you what, with this dipstick out, this is the easiest it's ever been with maneuvering this. And also getting to the bolt that's back under here, you have to kind of come in behind this dipstick, and there's not a lot of room. So don't forget to put that back on. Under your valve cover, don't forget your oil control solenoid gasket here and your O-ring there. Do not forget that. That's really important. Now, this doesn't really happen on Priuses. I haven't really seen it too much, but you want to always inspect your balancer like this, and you want to take your fingernail and rub it along that edge. That little line right there is where your crank seal rides. So you want to just make sure you don't catch an edge. If you catch an edge, then that means that your crank seal will be too far in and it will leak. and you'll need to replace your balancer, or you can get like a balancer saver kit. We just replace the balancer. But on this one here, you just want to put some Seal Glide around here before you put it in so it doesn't tear the seal. After watching this video, you should feel pretty confident doing this job. It is not incredibly difficult, and you don't really need any special tools. There's no special engine timing tools or anything like that. So thanks for watching. Hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, and hit the bell. You get notified of all my future content, which you definitely don't want to miss. Thanks for watching. I'll see you next time.